safe streets, vibrant neighborhoods, successful business and commerce. These are things that make a healthy community. We are a diverse community, rural, suburban, urban, a multitude of languages and ethnicities, ages and experiences. We are a collaborative community. Public-private partnerships make us a model community that others want to follow. It is what makes us unique. It is what makes us strong. The employees of Kent County reflect our diversity and seek to serve our communities.
People in this county, in this area, we wrap our arms around each other. We come together to collaborate, to solve problems. We're all working for the good of the whole. And I think that's wonderful. And you can see it. You can see it as you drive around Kent County.
Our impact starts the day a baby is born and a birth certificate is issued, to protecting children from deadly diseases through vaccination, to the public safety and justice provided by law enforcement and the courts, to offering veteran services and caring for the elderly. Every day we work to keep our communities robust.
I think if you are somebody who's interested in serving your community, in building a strong knowledge base and a good group of people to work with, then the county is one of your best employment opportunities out there. It's been completely rewarding in every way I could possibly explain for 26 years, and I feel like I grow every single day still today.
Leading these dedicated employees are 19-member Board of Commissioners and our County Administrator Controller, along with our elected officials and appointed department directors, placing emphasis on civic involvement, quality housing, vibrant neighborhoods, and strong, solid infrastructure to allow businesses to thrive. Professional, dedicated, collaborative, and innovative.
Behind the scenes, collaboration between foundations, charitable organizations, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, public sector demonstrated through the county, the city of Grand Rapids, the townships, all the cities and the villages in our area. If we don't come together, then we will not have the strength that we have today, and I only hope to build upon that.
Our aim is to make our communities the best they can be. We are involved in exciting development projects, sustainable recycling programs, and creative progressive prevention programming. We partner with elected officials, impacting policy ideas that become great achievements. We seek opportunities to reach out into the community and offer our services to help our residents make Kent County thrive.
Our relationship is solid, both from a staff standpoint at the county level as well as the Board of Commissioners. And they understand what we do and the benefits that we can do for the community, and vice versa. We couldn't do what we do without the help of Kent County.
While most of us are busy running our lives, Kent County's elected officials, administrator controller, and over 1,600 employees are serving the communities where we live our lives, so we can all have a place we are proud to call home. Kent County, its life well run.
Good morning, everybody, and we will call to order the meeting of the Kent County Board of Commissioners. Today's date is Thursday, May 25th, 2017. The time is 8:30 a.m. and we'll begin this morning with roll call.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Commissioners Antor.
Here.
Vice Chair Bolter. Here. Commissioners Breeby. Here. Volkowski.
Present.
Hennessy. Jones. Here. Kallman.
Here.
Korndike.
Present.
Mast.
Present.
Melton. Here. Morgan.
Here.
Ponstein.
Here.
Skaggs.
Here.
Steck.
Here.
Talon.
Here.
Vonk.
Here.
Voorhees.
Present.
Womack.
Present.
Chair Salfeld.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 18 present and 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. We will move then to our invocation and pledge, and I would call on Commissioner Korndike.
Thank you. I would like to introduce our Deputy Drain Commissioner, who is a retired Lieutenant Colonel in the Army and a chaplain, Doug Sport, to lead us in invocation.
Let's come together in prayer. Lord, we come together here today to do your business, not our own. That which is done might be done in such a way that it will bring harmony and good things to this county. We pray too for those who are in the sheriff's department that might find themselves in harm's way. Watch over them, Lord, and protect them. And we often come to you to ask you to bless us. Right now, Lord, we come to you to ask that you equip us to be a blessing to you, to the people, the county whom we serve, to our co-workers. And as the psalmist taught us to pray so many years ago, may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and for all.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Commissioner Korndike. We move then to, well, actually, before we move to item 5, I just had a bit of news, sad news. Got contacted early this morning by Carol Hennessy, her mother, who, as you all may know, has been sick, did pass away overnight last night. That is why she is not here today, so we'll keep her in our thoughts and prayers. Item 5 then is our special order of business. We have 2 of those this morning. We'll be with a presentation by Grand Rapids Whitewater, and I call on Chris Mueller. I know there's others here, but we'll start there. Doug Small as well. Good morning.
What do I know about rivers, right? Good morning, Commissioner, Chair Salfeld. Chris asked me to do a little introduction prior to their presentation, and before I start that, I want to thank Kent County for their continued support of our efforts in marketing a wonderful destination. It gets better every day, makes our job certainly easier when you have wonderful assets like we have in this community, and a big reason for that is the work that you do, so we thank you for your continued support. With that said, and speaking of assets, we recently co-authored or co-commissioned a study with Grand Action, a destination asset study. And the reason for it was we got to a point where we're seeing success, and at what point does our current product, if you will, sustain us and allow us to continue that growth and economic well-being for Kent County and the greater West Michigan region. So we set out to do the study to find out what it'll take to get to that next level. As a result of that study, we certainly expected something to come out of it as it relates to what I would call hard assets, infrastructure, and it did. It talked about convention center growth and other things, but the thing that got us most excited about, and was actually the number one finding of the consultants out of Minneapolis that were in town for 6 months, was that we need to activate the river. The river is the key to our future success. And it's not just the economics that get us excited about drawing more visitors in with the river. It's about branding also. This is Grand Rapids. And when we talk in our office about branding, a brand is nothing more than a promise. And if you're going to promise something, a brand characteristic, then you better deliver on it as a destination. We're falling a little bit short with our name to start with. And so we are going to put our energies behind our continued work, not just now. We've continued to work with Chris and Chip and others on this project. We have been at the table with them. And the study went on to say that the public realm, industry, and the foundations should make this their number one priority. If we want to go to the next level as a destination, then this should be the number one priority. So I hope that you take pay serious attention to what Chris has to say and the continued hard work that he has put in as a volunteer to make this community better. We certainly will continue our partnership with him, and I ask that you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the time, Doug, for the intro. I'm Chris Mueller, co-founded this crazy idea with a friend of mine, Chip Richards, about 8 years ago. So as Doug mentioned, we're falling short of the grandeur of the Grand and in the lack of ability to point at rapids. So wanted to walk through a little bit of the history, where we came from, where we're going, and give you some context for next steps. One of the things that I think summarizes, because the river toured for such a long time, even before photography, before the river was changed by the work of man, the rapids had a nearly uniform descent for about a mile, sufficient to give a decided, turbulent, and wild appearance to the waters, and to make a noise that broke the stillness of the forest and echoed from the neighboring hills. Not what you really think about when you look at the Grand today. Our hope is to bring that sentiment back. So the unique thing about the Grand, when you get into the history, is between Ann Street and Fulton Street, it drops 18 feet. Between Fulton Street and Lake Michigan, it drops a mere 4 feet. So literally, it's flat from its origins, meanders through the state, gets to Grand Rapids, falls off a cliff, essentially, which is why there are rapids there. And our hope is to through that, and the restoration is to achieve a couple project goals. Restore the rapids for everyone, improve habitat connectivity, and create economic communities. What we've done since we started with the options and the opportunities of the river is to really define what each of those things might entail, and we have, in addition to the destination asset study, other studies that we can share. The project is broken into probably two primary segments. You have a restoration segment, and then you have a revealing segment. So the revealing segment is between Ann Street and the 6th Street Dam, or dam depending on which side of the river and what you call it. And that's an area that the rapids weren't physically taken out. They're still there. They've just been underneath a pond for about 100 plus years. So our goal is to remove the dam, reveal the existing rapids that exist in this section, and then on the lower reach, which is the dam downstream to Fulton Street, is to put back what was taken out, which is the rapids, the boulders, substrate, in a way that it's a true restoration. So it'll function like a real river. It'll increase not only the recreational aspects, where the notion of you fix the bottom and you can play on top, but also for fishing and habitat. So when you dive into the social benefits, you have, the improvement of the community's connection to nature within the city. This thing goes right through our region, and how do you then connect the entire upstream, downtown, and downstream relations to such an awesome natural asset. Educational opportunities for urban youth, increased recreation, and then recruitment and talent. Being able to point at something, getting people excited about living where they live. Environmental benefits, it's awesome just to restore it. Increased habitat, stewardship ethic towards a natural resource. And then removing dams that currently are a hazard, that get in trouble in them every year, and then in addition don't create a healthy river. In terms of the economic benefits, we did a economic analysis on what does this really mean, and my wife is an economist, so I can easily mock them, but they have a hard time really seeing the big picture. But they focused on a very small segment of this project. And they said that in an annual basis, $15 to $19 million will come back to me. That's just based on people using it more. It doesn't really get into the sense of place. It doesn't get into the name, the talent retention, the environmental benefits. But that alone gives a really quick payback for this project. And then, the goal is to continue to add value and leverage all the other benefits that we have going on. In terms of other options, when you look at the potential, there's other places around the country that have done this. Closest to us is South Bend. There's an East Race. Not quite a restoration of a natural river, but has recreational benefits. Columbus, Georgia, and that's probably one of the best ideas of a river restored right through a downtown area, and you can dive into the benefits and the activation that causes. And then another one across the pond, Wausau, Wisconsin, has additional benefits. When you look into what Oak City has done, there's a lot of other options, and we'd love to get all of these in front of you, but there was an increased sales tax to fund the $54 million project in that particular case, which included civic amenities, wetlands, and walking trails. And since the completion, the city has attracted over $700 million of investment. And so when you look at, all of the additional activation, the potential for sports, right now we have a great rowing scene. Could it also become a national Olympic caliber rowing pool? Could it become an Olympic caliber slalom course for kayaking? Those are all great options and great potential, and we're trying to look at that as a potential as we go forward and trying to activate our own river. And what Doug mentioned is the Grand River is the game changer. How do we really take what could be a convener in our region? How do you take what could be an economic engine for our region, and how do you use that and leverage that to the next multiple generations to come? In terms of the schedule, we started about 8 years ago. Went from let's get an idea out there, let's figure out the science, let's then get opportunities and then figure out what we're constrained by. And we've gone through our past that what if phase. Where we are now is getting into implementation and really trying to make this happen. The goal is to submit permits yet this year, and we're going to launch a fundraising campaign. In addition, next year there's an endangered species in the river, working on that in 18. 19, construct a new invasive species barrier. 20, modify the dam, and then 21, 22 is restore. It's amazing how much in the weeds and complex this gets. So if you ever have about 6 hours, let us know and we can fill you in, and I'll put you in a room with an engineer. But one of the things, because of the complexity, is it's taken a lot of engineering. It also is not an inexpensive project. So one of the things that we've been working hard on is really calculating out of the total budget of $35 million, how is it paid for? So far, we've had wonderful support from local philanthropic organizations. We do have a federal grant that we've gotten, so we're over $10 million into the fundraising for the $35 million. But Sandy, if you could give us maybe the next couple slides of how are we going to get there, which is an important part. All you need is permits and money.
That's all you need.
So, good morning, Commissioners. Good to see you again for 3 years now. I've seen you twice in 2 weeks. So I appreciate the opportunity always to talk to you. And this is a really great project. I've been working with Grand Rapids Whitewater. For those of the Commissioners that don't know me, I'm also president of Canary Consulting. We're a regional consulting firm that works with organizations in capital fundraising and annual fund. And I think before I get into this too, I'd like to introduce the two other people that are with us. Mark Van Putten, who's president of the Wege Foundation. That's right there. And Matt Chapman, who's also with Grand Rapids Whitewater. So we've been working for about a year and a half. And the first work that we did, and for those of you that are familiar with the airport project, this would be a similar process. What we did first was a feasibility study, and what that entails is we sit down with people one-on-one and ask them what they think about the project. And we found some really interesting things in that study. There were really 3 different reasons that people love this project. One was there are people that just believe this is the right thing to do, to restore the river. We've done a lot to the river over the last 125 years, 150 years. That was for industry, no longer needs it for that purpose. So there are people that feel like we just need to restore the river. The second thing that we found was that there are the recreational opportunities that Chris referred to in terms of what the economic benefit that is. And finally, the third thing, which Doug alluded to a little bit, which is the economic opportunities after this project is done along the river. So the opportunities for parks and additional development on the river is really quite substantial. So we refer to this $35 million as what happens in the river as the wet. In other words, the wet is cost to restore the river. There are other projects that may happen along the banks as a result that this will be the catalyst for. So when we did the feasibility study, we sort of chunked it out, and you can see on your little pie chart that we thought that there was about $15 million to be had of local philanthropic support, that we would be looking for national support in terms of federal dollars of $14 million, and then state support, and state doesn't mean the state government, state just means local and regional government support, if you will. So that's the way it's been chunked out. We've already raised, as Chris alluded to, more than $10 million. We've had a couple of good pops recently, so that in that regard, things are going very well. So this gives you a little bit more detail, the next slide, with regard to exactly where the funding is coming from. We're feeling very confident that we're moving. What's good is we're moving along in all three pieces. So it's not like one section is moving along and then we got to drag along another. All three areas of private local support, federal support, and state support are all in stages of movement. From a fundraiser's perspective, that's a good thing. So I'm going to give it back to Chris to tell you more about that. And we'll open it up for questions. Chair Sawfeld at the end? Okay.
Thanks. So when you look at what we're going to do, you have trail access points, educational opportunities, and riverfront development. One of the things that has been highlighted through both planning exercises and as we've studied other rivers is the ability to have people get to the river and really traverse it over bridges, connect parks, Riverside Park down to Millennium Park. All of that is connectivity with trails and in public spaces. Educational opportunities, this is probably one of the most unique ones that kind of came out as we were halfway through the project, which is youth get really excited about this project. There's a curriculum that's starting to get baked into local schools, really talking about what does it mean to have a naturally functioning river, maybe what's the history of Grand Rapids. A lot of it centers around the river project and what was the Grand at one point in time and for what reasons was it altered. And then when you look at riverfront development, you have the ability to really activate some key pieces or redevelop ones that aren't necessarily the highest and best use. Things that, how do you turn windows towards the river as opposed to, maybe what was done in history, which is close it off and hope maybe forget about it. So returning the activation and the focal point of the city back to the river with all of these areas, I think is probably the holistic approach to what we're trying to accomplish. But I would love, if any questions, I would love to, either myself or Sandy and Matt and I can answer.
Okay, very good, thank you. We'll begin, or see if we have any questions here. Commissioner Korndike.
Thank you for the presentation, appreciate it. So one of your slides said translocate mussels. So I know mussels are, what does translocate mean and where are you going to translocate them to?
Yeah, we've hired, and I always give, what's the term? Malacologist. I call her a musselologist, but that's not, I don't think that's the appropriate term. She is from Missouri and has studied every single species of mussels that we have in the river. We used to have button factories where they would take the shells and punch buttons out of them. But we have one endangered species and then other threatened ones. Translocate means take them out of the river, put them in habitat where they can thrive over the short term, and then do the project. When the project is done, return them, make sure that they're cared for. And there's, once again, that's a 6-hour meeting if you want to get into the other details.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bukowski.
All right. Thanks for your work, Chris, and to your whole team. My question, though, is, and maybe it is another 6-hour meeting, the the white noise that comes with white water, especially that historical note that you could hear the rapids up in the neighborhoods. What are the studies about the noise that's going to be created by the water moving through downtown, and will be distracting, or, again, the beautiful shot of movies in the park, and will you be able to hear the movies?
Yeah, well, we won't be able to turn it off when the movies go on. But I think it's, if you've ever been to a natural functioning river, it's, for me and a lot of people, it's it's awesome noise. It's kind of one of those things that we're trying to bring it back to. Is it change the way the city listens to kind of its surrounding? I'm sure it is. We haven't done any studies based on the noise specifically, but I hope it's a great noise.
Right. All right, thanks.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Thank you, Chair. I go back just a little ways. At the DPW, we just had photographs of the river on the turn of the century, and on one of the islands was a dump, and they had swine there, and they had a building and managed waste there on the Grand Lake some years ago. And then I go back as far as the raft races on the river, and I always thought that was a good idea, and it was a lot of fun for young people and middle-aged people as well. I know the river has some depth issues, and I'm sure that's going to be taken care of this. But my real concern is with those with disabilities and the materials used along the river, whether it's planking or bricks or whatever, how hard it is to get around with wheelchairs and electric scooters and have places for people to rest and access the river. And I know my commissioner here to the left, Mr. knows a lot more about it than I do. But besides seniors and others that are injured, you also have young sports kids that are injured in football and other sporting events, and I'm sure they too would like a nice, relaxing access to the river rather than going on something that might show more beautification but is less functional. So just a comment.
Yeah, sure, and it's a very important topic. Our part of the project in Grand Rapids Whitewater is focusing on the wet section, which is restoring pretty much within the banks. There are a lot of planning exercises and projects that are coming out of those planning exercises. Specifically, GR Forward is one of them, the trail connectivity. All of that, in my experience, having been kind of alongside of that, not necessarily in charge of that, is the accessibility to everyone was a huge priority. I know where the river connects with the drains. Because there's nuances of what goes in the river and how is it connected, that is one of the main goals, is how do you create accessibility for even someone wanting to get in a kayak. And so I think hopefully it will be addressed, and there's others that are kind of coming alongside of this and doing their own projects out of it, and I think that's, as far as I've heard, it's been a priority.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Salfeld. Looking on page on the funding sources, I see where the federal support, the remaining need is 8.8 that they haven't, or what you're looking to do. In the recent budget that was released, the restoration of the Great Lakes has basically just been eliminated. How confident are you that the federal government is going to cough that up when their new philosophy now is things like Great Lakes restoration, which I'm assuming includes rivers? We're being told that should just be handled by the state, and that's not a federal problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Ponstein. It's good to see you. A clarification where it said federal resources, it's not necessarily from the feds. So that means that we're looking at national philanthropic resources as well. So that 15 million or 14 million that's coming from federal resources includes philanthropy. So we've received about 5.7 of that piece of the pie from the feds. That was prior to the last election. In terms of the federal money, I wouldn't be terribly optimistic about money coming from the feds, but we are working with a wonderful person in Washington, D.C. named Steve Carey, who's working with us hand in hand to look for where those federal pots may be. And so we're hopeful that we'll get some, but we're not so idealistic to think that we're not going to have to look for philanthropy and national.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Commissioner Steck.
Thank you, Chair. Exciting project. The $35 million that you have projected here, I think is all related to the actual implementation, construction. What are the projected ongoing maintenance costs to keep this up at the level we want to maintain, and who would be responsible for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The only part of the project that requires maintenance is the barrier. So there's a invasive species in the Great Lakes systems. We've been working with Fish and Wildlife and the permitting authorities on creating a barrier that has multi-functionality. Because of that, it has annual maintenance. So part of our project and fundraising goals are to create essentially in perpetuity funding to make sure that that's maintained. Right now, I think we have over 5 years an additional $1 million that it gets baked into some of the for the project. And we're making sure that that's an adequate amount. There's a manufacturer of the technology, and they're on our team trying to really define what the maintenance schedule is, and it probably will be an annual one. The rest of it, and Chip, if he were here, he would use the term free-range boulders, where you essentially put boulders back in and they move around, and that's a naturally functioning thing. So there's not a lot of maintenance related to the restoration part. Once it's done, be completed. I think the other thing is just the trails and the connectivity and parks. That all it's a very separate part of this project, and I think that will be a very different kind of discussion. But as it relates to our project, there's not a ton of maintenance that's needed.
Would your entity then be the ongoing sort of monitor?
Wonderful, great. Yeah, we've spent hours trying to figure out governance. There's a lot of great examples around the country of how they've project after it's completed, and then how do they make sure that maintenance is cared for? How do they program it? How do they theme it? How do they share the resources? One of the terms in the type of organization is conservancy. Detroit has one that's been really successful and has done a great job in their waterfront. They don't have an actively changed river. Theirs is more dry, but we're working through, and we'll likely, prior to completion, we'll have all that set up. But that's something that I'm through.
Okay.
Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, just want to thank you. I know that I think I first heard you discuss this project. Boy, it feels like 7 years ago. Would that be right? So I just want to thank you and Chip for all the work that you've done. I know it's been a labor of love. I know these deadlines keep getting pushed back, but it's great to see some pretty concrete ones. Just want to applaud you on the vision that you had to start with, and then the willingness to sort of grow that vision so that it really will river restoration and supportive of not just what's going on in the water, but the trails along the water, the parks along the water, the riparian restoration, and just a great project. And I wish you all the luck, and have 6 hours available in July, so I'll see you around mid-July.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've been saying it'll be 2 years for about 10, so now we really mean it. What's nice is to hear some of our partners really start to say this is a time frame. We're really starting to stick to it. It's not just an assumption or a guess anymore.
I've got 3 more questions, and we'll end it there, just in the interest of time, but I'm sure you guys will be available if there are questions following today's meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Commissioner Mass?
Thank you, Chair. There's been communication about doing something with the river all the way to the lake, dredging it out and so forth. How does this connect, or does it get affected by it or help it? Or
yeah, I mean, I think anyone that studies the river is a helpful thing. The project is very different, and it's outside of the reach of what we're really studying. The river functions quite differently once you get south of Fulton Street. You have only 4 feet of drop, so I think it's interesting that the history has taught us that they've tried to have the quest for navigation up to Grand Rapids for ever since the city's established. So I think it's a different project, but interesting.
It won't affect it one way or the other?
Not our project, no.
Okay.
Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair. I share your excitement. I think personally, this is just wonderful, but in response to the concern about those with handicaps and how they can get around, I'm going to take it to the other side. Having lived in Portland, Oregon for a number of years, and then also my daughter was in Boulder, the Willamette, and I don't remember the name in Boulder, but they are very, very well used by special, Paralympics. I don't know what the proper term is, and I apologize, but and one of the things that my brother-in-law, who is an avid outdoorsman, said when he came to Grand Rapids, actually for one of the first times, he said, has anyone looked at making this river more usable for that purpose, that excitement for them too? Is that an area you could tap into at all, funding? I don't know how much they might have, but I know that they are constantly, and I'm making a big they, I apologize, are looking for other places to have their races, their places, and there are not a lot of rivers, not that I know that, but from hearing where they can go that aren't too dangerous, but give enough of a thrill for them to feel like they're really part of the kayaking community.
Yeah, and I'll answer it in two parts. The first is, is there an opportunity? I think for sure. We've talked to Mike Gusweiler from the West Michigan Sports Commission about all of these events that could take place within the corridor, and Doug has been working on that as well. The second is just the access point. Right now, the Grand is horribly accessible for everyone. Partly that's good today for fishing because it's dangerous, but I think the planners and the folks that have kind of surrounded our work on the wet is really trying to change that and really trying to say, how do we get people not to look over a wall, but how do you get them to the water's edge? And there's constraints to that. We have flooding, as you know, but they're really trying to think creatively and outside of the box to make sure that it feels like that organically.
Okay, thank you.
And to the Vice Chair Bolton.
Just real quick, hi Chris. Wondering if you could just quickly talk about, this is a great project, but there is also an actual need to this in terms of there was a lamprey issue with a giant hole in the netting or something. Can you just also explain that there are some components to this that we need to fix? In addition to the wants, there's the need as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's, it's the river system right now has been modified, and the dam itself hasn't been inspected for 129 years. It meets certain requirements, but not other requirements. It doesn't impound enough water in order to be inspected. We found a hole in it. It's the de facto barrier for invasive species, and we do know that dams and rivers don't lie. There's a whole documentary out there and books and history about all these dams that were put in for industry that are failing. It's our goal to be proactive with that and really create a suitable alternative for a barrier without having to wait for it just to fall apart during a swift current. And so I think, the unique thing is there's need. There's also, for invasive species, there's a need for mitigating hazards. The hydraulics created by the dams in there, there's been numerous deaths in the Grand River, and people get in trouble if they too try to recreate on it. So all of those things are really give us some sense of urgency. I think the other thing is our federal funding that we do have has a time clock on it. We need to spend those funds or they go away. And as you know, the federal government is a little bit of an unknown. Having a known quantity and taking advantage of it, I think, is a great opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. Very intriguing, interesting presentation. So Chris, Sandy, Matt, Mark, thank you for being here and presenting. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions, feel free to get a hold of us, and I'm sure a couple of you know how to. So.
Yep, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move then to agenda item 5B, and we will have our 2017 financial overview presented by Stephen Duarte. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Commissioners. All of you should have received a copy of the financial overview. I just wanted to highlight a few things before we start. Financial overview is a significant portion of the present we do with the rating agencies. And when I do that in New York, it probably takes 40 or 45 minutes, but I'll do an abbreviated version for this because some of the things I go over, you folks are well aware of. I would point out and caution you that the data is a point in time, and that's March 31st of 2017, and some of the data has already changed, okay? The rating agencies are interested in a broad range of information. Some examples are they like to look at trends, they like to look at property taxes, they like to look at household income, employment, financial policies, and whether we adhere to our financial policies as some examples. If you will turn to page 12, I will start highlighting some of the issues that we discussed with New York. On page 12, we have a labor force distribution by industry. I think the interesting thing about this is that 9 out of the 15 categories that we list had increases in all 4 years. The most significant one, going down the left side of that chart, manufacturing durable goods grew from 66,800 to 80,600 over that 4-year stretch. 13,800 additional jobs at over 20.7% growth. The area that didn't growth is government. Federal, state, and local had a decline from 24.6 to 24.5, 100 lost positions, or about 0.4% loss. And education stayed flat at 23,000. At the bottom, the most significant number, the total non-farm employment grew over that 4-year period from 495,000 to 550,500, 55,500 growth, or 11.2%. Turn to page 15. The upper part of page 15 talks about state equalized and taxable valuation. One of the things they'd like to talk about is a full value per capita SEV, and taking which is 2 times the SEV divided by population. So taking the numbers for 2016, we had about $48 billion in SEV divided by the 2015 estimated population of 636,369. The full value per capita was 75,834. They use that ratio to measure against other communities to see where we stand. Dropping down to the table just below that, one of the things we're interested in is the SEV and taxable value history. If you look at that, we bottomed out in 2013, and since 2013, the last 4 years, we have shown growth both in the taxable value and in the SEV. Column 3, actually column 4 probably, SEV change from prior year. If you look at the last 2 years, SEV grew 4.7% in 2016. We're projecting it would be 7.4% for 2017. One column over, taxable change from prior year. In 2016, it was up 0.5%, and in 2017, we're projecting about 3.7%. And finally, on the graph at the bottom of the page, what we look at is the property tax growth margin. How much room do we have between value and SEV? And that is about 12.5%. And as you can see, the green line is going going down, so the margin has increased over the last few years. Any questions on that page? We could turn to page 18. Because we're borrowing, in this case, we're going in to borrow tax anticipation notes. They're very interested in collection rates for Kent County and obviously all the communities. If you look at that table on page 18, you will see collections. In the third column, you'll see collections to March 1 of the year following the levy. So if you look at 2015, you'll see that we levied $117 million. We had at March 1 of 2017, collected 93.62%. And 2016, we had collected 93.46%. If you look to the collections to March 1st, 2017, you'll see that by 1 year later, we had collected 99.66% and of the 16 taxes. And of course, the 16 levy was still 93.46 because there was no additional activity from that point, same March. If you turn to page 20, the other thing they'd like to know is how much debt you have and where it stands in relationship to your statement of legal debt. If you look at that table at the top, the 2000 state equalized value, it's $25,910,000,000. The legal debt limit for us, 10%, is $2,500,000,000. The debt outstanding for Kent County as of this date was $382 million, which gave us a margin of additional debt that could be legally incurred of $2.2 billion. And our debt outstanding as a percentage of SEV is 0.5%. Any questions on that? Rolling down a little bit lower, we take a look at the debt statement. Just above overlapping debt, it says total direct debt. Our total direct debt at this point was $382,829,000. Of that, moving to the right, self-supporting or portion debt paid directly by benefited communities was about $218,600,000. That's about 57% of our debt is supported by other revenues other than the general fund. Our net debt is $164,192,000. Net debt per capita is 258.01, and as a percentage of SEV, it's about 0.6%. If you move down to the bottom and look at overlapping debt included, the net per capita there is $2,683.26, or about 6.6% of SEV. Our trend has been over the last few years to go down. The first year I went to New York, and we were running about $511 million in debt. And it has been down, and over the last couple of years, a little bit more. If you don't have any questions on that, I'll move over to page 21.
Oh, I'm sorry, we do, right here.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning. I'm looking at last year, per capita debt was $208, and this year it's $258. Percentage-wise, that's quite a jump. What would that be attributed to?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The per capita debt.
Yeah.
That last year it was 208, this year it's 278.
Okay.
Percentage-wise, that's quite a jump. Is there some big borrowing we did?
Well, we issued bonds in 2016 for the juvenile facility in the kitchen. We issued some additional bonds in early 17 for dispatch. So there's been a couple bond issues that went out since that's my recollection.
The dispatch, I think, would have a lot to do with that, and keep in mind that that is coming back to us through this, through the assessment, that surcharge that was passed.
That would appear under supported debt.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
On page 21, we have an amortization schedule to pay off a debt. They'd like to know how much debt you pay off over 10 years. For us, in 2026, we will have paid off about $241,460,000. That's about 63.1% of the outstanding debt we have. So they like to see at least half that debt reduced over 10 years, and we'll make that. On page 24, one of the concerns they have, it shouldn't surprise anybody, is what your outstanding liability is for your pension, what your unfunded liability is for your pension, and for your OPEB. On page 24, we're looking at the pension fund, and in the middle of the page, you see a table that talks about the total pension liability and plan fiduciary net position and position liability. And for 2015, because we didn't have a 2016 actuarial report or financial report, the outstanding liability was about $31,963,000. This is the financial statements that were a part of the implementation of GASB 67 and 68. And that format you're seeing there is a little different than what you normally see, because this is actually financial statements. In the past, we've shown you the actuarial report that talked about valuation assets and the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, which gives you a little bit different number, okay? To put that in perspective, last year, the 2015 funded level for the pension fund was 97.4 based on those measures. And for this year, since I've already seen the actual report, has went up to 0.7%. But that's a little bit different display and calculation than what you're seeing here from the financial statements because of GASB 67.
And I would add that the two main reasons why that went down is that we adopted new mortality rates, which is an important thing to do, and then secondly, the exiting employees from the airport. And so to have those two things not happen, I'm sure we'd still be at the, but I mean, we're very close again, so, yeah.
Will this offer any change in our contributions or not? I think no reductions or?
The contributions for the pension fund will not change because of that. One GASB covers the plan, one GASB covers how you report for it in the financial statements, okay? And the contributions for the pension fund are part of the assumptions that you have in it. For this next year, it's going to go down slightly.
Mr. Bolter.
Hi, Steve. Just a quick question on this, and I only ask because I know the legislature's looking at it. Are our OPEB numbers in here? I know this is the pension, but what percentage are we funded for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it, Joe.
The percentage we're funded for our other post-employment benefits right now.
The health care.
Yeah, it's 36%.
Yeah, we're going to cover that in the
Oh, we are,
page.
okay.
I thought that's what you asked, but I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to answer the wrong question. We go to page 26. We'll talk a little bit about the OPEB liability. The OPEB liability is back on the the actuarial plan because the new GASBs have not been implemented for OPEB. OPEB will GASB 74 and 75, and we'll start doing those over the next couple years. They're to be implemented for 15, excuse me, they're to be implemented in 17 and 18. We are in position to do that. But if you look at the bottom of the page where it says funding status and funding progress, this based on the 2015 actuarial report, the plan was 31.1% funded. The unfunded actuarial accrued liability was about $38 million. I also have the benefit of having the 2016 report now, which I didn't have when I went to York. The unfunded actuarial accrued liability has now dropped to $34 million, and our funding status has climbed to 36.4%.
Thank you.
And quite frankly, at $34 million compared to other communities, and what a deal. I mean, it's not great that we have an unfunded liability, but it's minuscule compared to most other communities.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yeah, Steve, can you put that in context for me? I mean, seems to me.
They tell me the city of Lansing has an unfunded liability of $400 million for OPEB.
For OPEB?
I don't remember some of the larger counties, but there are huge numbers out there.
It's $400 million compared to. I think somebody years ago made some very wise policy decisions.
Yep, we continue to be, if you go back in history for us, we were a pay-as-you-go community until 2007. And in 2005, we had our first actuarial report to take a look and assess where we stood with OPEB. In 2007, we said we're going to deal with it. We formed a VIBA, 501c9, separate trust, and started it. So from 2007 to now, we've raised 36% of that. We're 36% funded. I think we can show the state or anybody else that we have done the right thing, that we continue to make progress, and that we have a plan to take that to zero.
I would say this, if other communities had the numbers on the pension and OPEB that Kent County does, there would not be discussions in Lansing right now about changing things. Yep. Commissioner Mast.
No, I don't think so. I think I was applauding probably.
We're talking some communities, again, I'll talk Lansing because I just read an article on it, that it takes about 30% of their general fund revenues to pay their pension and OPEB liability.
Wow. Compare
Compare that to us for our cost, which would be somewhere slightly under 13.5% for both. And it's just something that you have to have for and be organized. We do, and I'm proud to say I think we're doing better than most communities. If we turn to 34, that's going to have the preliminary results for 2016 and the 2017 budget laid out for you. I'm doing it the way I like to do it, and that's the focus at the bottom, third line up, to talk about the net revenues. For 2015, we had net revenues of $262,375. In 2016, preliminarily, when we went there, we were expecting to have a net revenue of about $310,000. And of course, for 2017, we adopted the structurally bound budget. Going, like I'd like to do, I'd like to go down the left side, and what I do is highlight some of the, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold. I'd like to highlight some of the things that jump out at me and explain them for the rating agencies, and sometimes they pick up other ones that they want to talk about. So starting at the top, intergovernmental revenues. To talk about 2015 actual, where we were at about 21.2 million, And then 2016, we're at about 24.1 million. The issue with that was that we had originally included, because of the timing and when you get the notification, we had originally included a higher number for the liquor tax. And then in fifth, they changed how they were doing the liquor tax, reduced it about in half, and said counties were limited to 101% of the collections in their own county. That reduced us down about $3 million. Also going on at that time, the whole thing about the community stabilization fund and in reimbursement for property tax, personal property tax that you lose. At the time we put together, they didn't even know how they were going to do it. They didn't know what the forms were going to look like, what date we would get the money. So there was no estimate in the 2016 budget. Strange, they came through with a reimbursement for 2016 of slightly over $3.3 million. So that offset the fact that we had budgeted liquor tax that we didn't get. That's cool. And the trick of that, or the bonus that came with that, is that we ended up getting about 50% more than we should have. In other words, we lost in the $2 million rate. They gave us over $3 million. And they did that for every community that was involved in it. The reason that occurred was there was a quirk in the law they wrote that said you're going to reimburse them for lost PPT, but you got to spend X amount of money. So when they had to fulfill the spending the extra money, we all got a bonus statewide. Now everybody suspects, well, two things. One, they're hoping they don't come take it back, and I don't think they are. But they also suspect, and I know there's talk, about changing that quirk in the law so you don't get reimbursed for more than you actually lost. But for 1 year, we got a little bit of a windfall. Thank you, and let's move on. Going down to the expenditures, prosecuting attorney, I noticed that the 2018 actual was quite a bit higher than the 2016 actual. Reason for that was we took a number of grants that were in the prosecutor's office and moved those over to special projects and accounted for them the way they should have been for. So you'll see a corresponding move later that I will talk about. Information technology on the budget side, I compared the 2016 budget with the 2017 budget, and you'll see a rise from about 6 million to about 7.5 million. That occurs because of the new CGI software package, in which case the first 2 years of the licensing fee was capitalized as part of the implementation of the project. Year 3 became an operating cost, so will be spread out to all departments through the cost allocation plan. And that was about $1 million of that. And going down, all the way down to transfers out special projects, that's the flip side of the question on the prosecutors. If you take a look at 2015 actual to 2016 actual, went up a little bit over $1 million. That again was the transfer of the projects that were previously accounted for in the prosecutor's office, now being moved over to special revenue funds, and we transfer the money out to support that. With that, we would expect fund balance at the year, the very bottom line, for 2016 to be somewhere around $69.4 million. That would give us, if we were at that point, would put us at about 40.04%. In other words, we're just barely above our 40% commitment on policy for minimum fund balance. That puts us about $68,000 over. That's getting close, and that will continue to be an issue as the budget grows larger in subsequent years. The 40%, the absolute amount of money that we have to set aside goes up. So right now, we're still continuing to meet our 40% expectation, but it's very, very, very close. Any questions on the preliminary numbers or the 2017 budget?
Commissioner Bukowski.
Again, thank you for you and your team's awesome work on this and keeping our numbers straight. My question on that front that you just talked about, that 40% is our self-imposed number, correct? Not a GASB number or a state or federal number?
Ours, and it came out, I believe, after GASB 54. I try to remember them all. I believe after GASB 54, they changed how the components of fund balance looked, and it also changed how you had to take a look at them. At that point in time, we had a couple of work sessions and met with the board. We laid out the rationale behind it, and we adopted that 40% ourselves, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the 40% fund balance is an issue that I hear about repeatedly from people wondering why we have that. And I know that we've got a statement of reason and rationale. Can you identify for me, or at least provide that, a simple current statement of why we do 40%?
I need a little bit of clarification because I didn't hear it again.
The question is, why did we impose the 40% on our fund balance?
Well, it provided some liquidity and some additional ability to respond to adverse events if we had them. And so we went through and looked at that and set up the components. It also was very close to what we're doing anyway under the other classification system. It just changed how we stated it, and we formalized it because of GASB.
Just as a follow-up, do you have a memorandum or a statement that explains that rationale that you can distribute?
We have the policy.
It's just the policy?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's laid out right in one of your financial policies, which will be in the back of this book.
I carry this around in my billfold, and this actually explains it. It's a graph. It shows the money coming in and how we pull on it till the end of July, basically, where we bring it down to right around a little above 20%, and then it starts coming back up. So that is why we...
The low point, 20%?
The low point is, well, what is it? What is our low point? Right around 20%?
Our low point is in July, and we probably are down to, it varies, but around $25 million in cash. And you know, when you look at fund balance, that is, as I've explained on a couple of occasions, those are our targets. But it only exists at a point in time. Most of the year, we're well below that, and that's why you have to be aware of what goes on. And before I forget, I just want to say all the financial policies and some articles that talk about the good things that are going on in Kent County follow this, and you should look at those just to refresh your memory if you get an opportunity.
I think Commissioner Morgan had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's real important to have that cushion. Now, is all of the fund balance that's not all cash, is it, in our fund balance? There's some assets in there too, correct?
All fund balances now, I'm sorry.
All fund balance, we're talking cash or assets?
Is there assets involved in that?
It is not a one-for-one correlation with cash.
That's what I want to say.
If you look in the classifications, you'll see non-spendable. That means non-cash. Okay.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chair, that graph, what it does, we don't have to issue tax anticipation notes to cover our operational expense.
Which almost all other jurisdictions do.
So.
And I think the other thing I want to make a point of is that if you look at how the rating agency rate communities, and if you use the standard criteria they use, Kent County does not come out to a AAA. On some of those criteria, if you score them poorly, you can't recover. It's a lot, you can't move it. There are a couple of those categories. There are mitigating circumstances that allow us to get boosted up, and that's why we are a AAA stable community. look at in the write-ups that we just got, they're always saying your financial policies are strong, you adhere to your financial policy, you have good liquidity. I was refreshing my memory yesterday on either Moody's or S&P. In 3 places they said, because you have good liquidity, we consider you a good credit risk. And so that's very, very important.
And just by the way, this booklet, something very similar to this is what we walk through when we have these meetings with S&P and Moody's in New York. And in an even more detailed version than we're doing today. Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I love the 40%. I think we set the bar pretty high, and what happens when you don't set the bar high, you have what's happening in the rest of the state, especially the federal level, where money is nothing more. It's like monopoly money. We take it pretty seriously here, and I think that's a great number in good times and bad. I think you know, that's a number we should strive for to keep what we're doing, you know, forward. That's what gives people confidence in Kent County for a lot of different reasons to come here and move here and do business here too. So, just a comment.
Other questions? Were you completed with your?
That was all I was gonna do.
So any other questions for Steve, Commissioner Mass?
Could I just raise a question, Steve? When you talked about, one of your first pages, they look at the estimated SEV and TV per capita. Why does that? What relationship does that have to our financial strength, I guess, or?
The higher the SEV in most states, because they don't have the taxable value concept, indicates the ability to levy more taxes and how that tax relates to how many they have to serve. And they like to compare that against communities nationwide. That's the best I can give you on it.
Okay.
Commissioner Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair Saltzell. Steve, we keep talking about GASB, but for the sake of our guests and those watching, explain what GASB is, if you would, or, you know, we say, well, this is GASB rule, so and so. What is it? Who is GASB? They're not an elected bunch, I know that.
It was a movie with cars in it, the Gatsby.
That's, I mean, the GASB is, if I understand your question, is Governmental Accounting Standards Board, okay? And they are the authority on how financial statements should be prepared. They provide the guidance across the whole industry for the United States. And the idea is, if you're following GASB, then when you look at the financial statements of Los Angeles, California, New York City, or Kent County, they've all been prepared under consistent standards that gives you the ability to evaluate and see consistency between the different communities. And while they can't hold the gun to your head and make you follow them, you know, it affects your ability to get a clean audit. It affects your ability to issue debt, both at the state level and with the rating agency. So it's a big deal. And so it behooves you to follow this as they're put down.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Towns.
Just a quick comment, Chair. I highly recommend to my colleagues taking a look at some of the policies in the back, particularly we've been talking about the fund balance policy that's there. It's all laid out. And as we're coming into the CIP process, take a look at the fiscal policy on the capital improvement program. I think that's very helpful, as we'll be taking a look at that real soon. Thank you.
Good point. Okay. Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, everyone.
And as always, your presentation, very nicely done. We'll move to agenda item 6, which is public comment. If there's any public comment this morning, please come forward. You have 3 minutes, and please state your name and address when you start out. Good morning.
My name is Annette Fenwick, 8545 Longleaf Drive, Southeast in Ada, 49301. Good morning. This is a subject here. I am actually here representing Vicky's Pet Connection. We're a local animal rescue that's worked closely with the Kent County Animal Shelter for many years. And we are here, we rescue both cats and dogs, but we are here specifically because we found out this week about a proposal that's on your agenda today, which would basically allow the Kent County Animal Shelter to redesignate stray cats as nuisance animals, which would then require a $25 fee to anyone who brings one in. This is quite a change of subject, I know, from what you were just listening to. But I think we and probably many of our community members would be dismayed to hear our municipal shelter referring to any of our community cats as nuisance animals. The Kent County Animal Shelter was purpose-built, I think at about a $5 million budget, to house our stray and lost animals. And there is no fees currently for dogs. The Kent County Animal Shelter is really the only game in town for cats. The Humane Society of West Michigan does not take them in. They take in only owned animals, and small rescues like us do not have the resources to house lost or stray animals. So if, this is very esoteric until you go to your garage and find a stray cat has taken up residence and you begin running into the walls and realize how hard it is to try to find resources for these animals. There is no animal control available for cats, it's only for dogs. So if you have a cat that you need to move garage, you're going to have to find yourself a carrier and load that animal up yourself and drive it during business hours, Monday through Friday, to the Kent County Animal Shelter, where you're now going to be asked to leave a fee for $25 for your good service to the community. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are quite surprised at that when they're standing at that desk. There's about a $2.2 million budget, I believe, for the shelter, and we're basically telling our community now that you're going to have to pay to use that